Edward and Connie Sumner are a married couple who live in a fancy area called Westchester County in New York. They have a young son named Charlie, who is 8 years old. Their relationship is filled with love, but it has become routine and lacking excitement. One day, while they are out shopping in the city, a strong gust of wind blows Connie into a stranger named Paul Martel, causing both of them to fall down. Connie hurts her knee during the fall, and Paul kindly suggests that she come up to his apartment so he can help treat her injury. Connie decides to accompany Paul upstairs. Once they reach his apartment, Connie heads to the bathroom to clean her scraped knee. When she finishes, she steps out and discovers that Paul has prepared a cup of tea for her. As Connie talks on the phone with her son, Paul places an ice pack on her leg and gently rests his hand on top of hers to hold it in place. After ending the call with her son, Connie is taken aback when Paul takes the opportunity to introduce himself. However, she only shares her first name and mentions that she needs to leave. Despite her reluctance, Paul insists that she take one of his books and directs her to a specific page, page 23, which contains a passage about seizing opportunities in life's fleeting moments. Feeling uneasy, Connie decides to leave promptly. Later on, Connie comes across Paul's phone number tucked inside the book he had given her earlier. Curiosity gets the better of her, and she decides to dial his number from the Penn Central station. Surprisingly, Paul invites her to his place once again. When Connie arrives, Paul resumes his flirtatious behavior towards her. Despite feeling an undeniable attraction between them, Connie decides to leave, trying to resist the temptation. However, her resistance weakens, and she finds herself returning to Paul's place for a third time. This time, they share a dance together, which adds to the intensity of their connection. Overwhelmed by her emotions, Connie abruptly leaves, feeling uncomfortable once again. Yet, only moments later, she realizes she has left her coat behind and returns to retrieve it. In an unexpected turn of events, Paul seizes the opportunity and physically lifts Connie off her feet, carrying her to his bedroom. They engage in a sexual encounter that leaves Connie feeling a mixture of arousal and fear. She knows deep down that what she is doing is risky and potentially damaging to her marriage. Nevertheless, both Connie and Paul find themselves exhilarated by the forbidden thrill of their affair. Connie uses her work as a convenient excuse to continue visiting Paul, allowing their secret encounters to persist. Edward becomes suspicious of Connie's behavior after he catches her in a lie involving a close family friend. This incident raises his concerns, especially as he notices Connie purchasing seductive lingerie for herself and becoming more distracted in their relationship. Feeling unsettled, Edward takes action by firing an employee whom he perceives as disloyal. To his surprise, this employee, who happened to witness Connie and Paul together, confronts Edward and suggests that he should examine his own family closely. Struck by this comment, Edward decides to hire a private investigator to uncover the truth. Edward's world shatters when the private investigator provides him with incriminating photographs of Connie and Paul together, confirming his worst fears. Devastated and heartbroken, Edward realizes the depth of the affair and the betrayal that has been taking place behind his back. Meanwhile, Connie finds herself increasingly burdened by guilt as the affair continues. Realizing that she can no longer continue the affair, Connie drives to Paul's place the next day with the intention of ending things in person. However, when she arrives, she discovers Paul with another woman who appears to be going to the library with him. Filled with anger and hurt, Connie confronts him about his involvement with multiple women. She firmly declares that their affair is over. As the argument escalates, they find themselves in an elevator where Connie continues to question Paul's actions. In a fit of rage, she pushes him out of her way and storms off, leaving Paul behind. However, before Connie can leave the building, Paul catches up to her and intercepts her path. Connie fights back, pushing him away and resisting his advances. But despite her efforts, Paul overpowers her, leaving Connie feeling powerless. Eventually, she surrenders herself to him, allowing him to seduce her once again. They engage in erotic sexual activity right there in the hallway of his apartment building. After their encounter, Connie leaves, narrowly missing Edward, who has arrived at Paul's apartment to confront him. Paul lets Edward inside, and they engage in a conversation about Connie. To Edward's shock and dismay, he notices a snow globe that he had given Connie in the past, now in Paul's possession. Paul explains that Connie had gifted it to him, further exacerbating Edward's emotions. Overwhelmed by anger and grief, Edward loses control and uses the snow globe as a weapon, striking Paul's skull with a fatal blow, causing him to die instantly. In a state of panic, Edward realizes the severity of what he has done and decides to clean up the evidence. In the midst of his actions, he overhears Connie leaving a voicemail for Paul, tearfully expressing her decision to end the affair, and her exhaustion from lying and hurting her family. Edward erases the message, eliminating any trace of Connie's intentions. He then places Paul's lifeless body in the trunk of his car and later disposes of it in a landfill, hoping to erase the evidence of the violent act he committed. After discovering her phone number on Paul's desk, detectives from the NYPD pay a visit to the Sumner household. They inform Connie that Paul's estranged wife had reported him missing, leaving her surprised to learn about his marital status. Connie hastily asserts that she barely knows him. A week later, the detectives return with unsettling news: the body of Paul has been found. Both Edward and the detectives observe Connie's visible reaction upon receiving this information, raising suspicions. Later, while taking Edward's clothes to the dry cleaner, Connie stumbles upon the incriminating photos of her and Paul. Distraught, she realizes that Edward is aware of her affair. That evening, at a social gathering, Connie notices the snow globe she had gifted Paul among their collection, but now it is back in their possession. Sharing a significant glance with Edward, she begins to suspect that he may have played a role in Paul's disappearance. Later on, Connie musters the courage to confront Edward about his potential involvement in Paul's disappearance. However, Edward skillfully redirects the blame back onto her, highlighting her own actions and betrayals. To Connie's astonishment, Edward confesses that he had been aware of her affair all along and, in fact, had contemplated killing her instead of Paul. This revelation leaves Connie stunned and overwhelmed. In the days that follow, Connie stumbles upon a hidden compartment within the snow globe that Edward had given her years ago. Inside, she discovers a touching memo that Edward had carefully placed there. It includes a photograph of herself, Edward, and a young Charlie, accompanied by a heartfelt message declaring Connie as his beautiful wife and the best part of every day. Overwhelmed by the realization of Edward's deep love for her, Connie's face is marked by profound regret and sorrow. As she takes a step towards healing, Connie decides to burn the photographs that serve as a painful reminder of her affair with Paul. In this vulnerable moment, she admits her fear to Edward, expressing her genuine apprehension. In response, Edward offers to turn himself in to face the consequences of his actions. However, Connie objects, asserting that they can find a way to move forward and rebuild their lives together. For a brief moment, they seem to regain a sense of normalcy, attempting to restore their relationship. But during an evening drive home from an event, Edward stops the car at a red light, with Charlie peacefully asleep in the backseat. In a moment of escape and longing for a fresh start, Connie indulges in a fantasy of fleeing the country and assuming new identities. Surprisingly, Edward agrees, acknowledging that the idea sounds perfect. As Connie begins to cry, seeking comfort, it is revealed that Edward has intentionally stopped the car near a police station, implying his intention to turn himself in and face the consequences of his actions.
Thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the bell icon, and stay connected with us.